Welcome to the Home Building Hub, your essential podcast guide to building your new home. Hosted by industry experts Colin Bischoff and Darren Brennan, this conversational podcast will help better educate you about all things new home building so you can avoid costly mistakes and enjoy your building experience to the fullest, no matter which home builder you choose.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Home Building Hub. You're with Colin and co-host Darren Brennan, as always. So to those listening in this episode, if you're at the start of the process, that is, you haven't picked a builder yet, continue to listen. If you're at the contract stage and you haven't quite signed that contract, maybe it's ready or about to be ready, this is also an episode for you. So they're the two areas we're targeting today. And what we've done is we have a special guest. We're going to introduce Fabian Pisano. He's the director of a company called Phase Consulting. Today, we're going to ask Fabian 5 questions around advice, around mistakes, where to start, and he's going to give a couple of real-life examples that will really highlight some value to you and some great lessons. So you can take those away from this episode and just, I guess, in this whole understanding that, you know, people are going to finance brokers, they're not going to banks these days. And our industry, Darren, on the side of the builder, it's becoming more prevalent for people to go to consultants or coaches or whatever the right term is, or brokers and advocates, instead of going direct to builders. So Fabian is created his own company that sort of offers that service, and I'll let him continue on in the introduction. But we're going to get some valuable insights from Fabian that will help you with your home building journey, as I said, at the front end and at contract stage, and he actually does help past that as well. So Fabian, welcome.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Yeah, absolutely love what you guys are doing. So yeah, privileged to be on here.
That's awesome, mate. Yeah, obviously you've been around the industry for a while, Fabian. I know obviously a bit of your history and even your partners in the industry too. So, mate, you guys are well and truly stitched up with us in the building industry, and it's a great place to be, eh?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I think between us is almost 20 years of residential building experience. Mainly across the majors in Victoria. And yeah, so we've, after about 20 odd years combined, we've thought, you know what, we're not going to work for the builder anymore. Let's do our part to help the consumers on the other end.
Yeah, it's a good place to be too. I think, obviously, as Colin mentioned, there's more and more of this going on, but I think consumers are looking for help in terms of just, working their way through. They often, get a conveyancer to look at their land contract, but they don't really get anyone to look necessarily at their building contract. They might appoint a lawyer, but the lawyer's giving strict legal advice rather than advice around what's my house actually going to look like, or have I selected the right sort of fittings and fixtures in this area? And I think that's obviously a big part of what you're able to help guide them through. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. People think of a build contract. I was only just at an event last night, and we were talking about the HIA contract and what a contract review looks like. It's so much, a build contract, so much more than just a HIA 30 odd page contract. It's your specs, your inclusions, it's all your pricing, your plans. And as you guys know, that everything else in between all that, right, that a client's got to look at and sign. And it can be overwhelming. So a big part of what we do is just help the client navigate, based with our experience that we've got, help them navigate all that documentation and make sure they've got an understanding, and more importantly, the confidence and the information they need to go through the journey.
Yeah, for sure. I guess what would be one piece of advice you'd give to the consumer as they embark on their new home journey? I guess what would that be?
Look, pump the brakes. Just take your time, mate. Like I can't tell you how many people come to us. They've rushed through certain parts and need to sort of backtrack or get us to look over something they've already signed because they didn't understand it and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I guess my one bit of advice, particularly to the first home, people entering the market for the first time, it's such a big emotional and financial investment. A lot of people will only ever do it once, ever. Just take your time, and that goes from, that early stage where you're trying to find a builder and, maybe get your budget sorted and how much you can afford, through to, reading and understanding your paperwork. It is a long journey. That's just the reality of it all. And all that's leading up to getting your slab in the ground. and then you've got the construction piece where they're building your house. So yeah, just take your time.
Would that apply to land as well as contract for the build?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the works, like finding the right block and then finding the right builder and everything in between. Yeah, like I said, it is such a long process, and I don't think rushing through it does any good for anyone. Builders included. That's where mistakes and slip ups happen. So I think yeah, the best thing for a customer or people out there looking to build is really just um, yeah, just take a step back and ask the right questions. If you don't understand what you're looking at, find someone who can help you, whether it's someone like us, you guys, or a friend or a family member. Use the resources around you.
Yes, good call. So leading on that, people who are just at the early stages, what can you give us the top 3 mistakes in your experience that you've come across with real live everyday clients pre-contract? What are the top 3 mistakes?
I think just a bit of a segue into this one, people rushing. Again, like we get people all the time come to us, an example that I've got is, I got referred to you but I got referred to you from a conveyancer, and she said you might be able to help me this. I've signed this variation. The builder's charged me an extra $5,000, but I don't know what it is. Well, you shouldn't be signing it if you don't understand. It's not to say that it doesn't have to happen anyway, and you're going to have to sign it anyway, but just make sure you're informed and understand. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing we see is just people rushing, not taking their time. And I think that probably comes with, maybe a bit of excitement from that person that's building, potentially a little bit of pressure from the builder. We know how strict some of these timelines can be and how quick things need to happen for them. And yeah, maybe a bit of anxiousness as well. So yeah, I think don't rush is the first one. Second one would be ask the right questions. We're seeing a lot of the times things are happening after the fact, and then they're asking the questions about why, as opposed to ask the questions up front. If you're not sure, no question's a silly question. Whether it's someone you've got helping you as an external or a third party, or asking the builder's representative or the builder themselves questions. They're gonna help you and do their best to give you what you need to make the right decisions and proceed.
On that one too is, obviously you deal with different people throughout that building process too. So often you're dealing with a sales consultant early in the piece. You move into the operational space as your contract's getting prepared, and again, that person's level of expertise may not be quite as high. So again, if you're not getting an answer that you think's the right answer, or you want a bit more depth, you should always ask more questions. I know, um, I get involved a lot in that myself, where I'm having to help guide our team through some of those questions, because the customers asked a curly one, and the answer isn't necessarily easy. So making sure that you get to the right person that can give you the right answer, or if you're not getting that, then talk to someone like yourself, obviously Fabian, who can help in that with your level of expertise likewise. So
Yeah, and look, working in building for so long, a client, like you said, mate, sometimes the gap in experience, not only from that person, that's working for the builder, they might have not have the right experience to answer that question, but the gap between the consumer's knowledge and experience to the builder, or the builder's, whoever's working for the builder, is so big that, sometimes we just need to bridge that a little bit. And like you said, I don't think there's anyone out there that is working at a builder that's had a question from a client, whether it be a curly one or something that they can't answer. That's not going to try and use their network. There's so many people that they work with that'll be able to at least give them the right advice, or they'll find the answer for you. So
It's good.
yeah,
Number
that's where
2,
that
ask the right question.
comes back in, that no question's a bad question, right? Because there will be an answer there for that. And the other part I like about that is that ability to help educate ourselves, being sometimes the tough questions are the best questions, because we get to educate ourselves too. And I say my knowledge from construction's enormous, but I don't know it all, and every job's different. So you're always learning, and that's the part too. That's why I find this industry so exciting, is that every build is different, every house is different, and there's so much to always be absorbing and taking on and learning. So it's a great part of what we do.
Absolutely.
On that one, before you get to number 3, the people who may not know what questions to ask, what how do they know what questions to ask? I suppose is my question to you. How would you provide some advice on that?
Look, I think sometimes it takes a bit of courage, and you got to put your pride aside to almost admit to the fact that you actually have no idea what you're looking at, and where to even start. So I think if you can get past that, you just need to find someone who can help you with that, and coach you on what questions to be asking. What we're seeing is, there's a lot of assumptions made, I think, between builder and client, and just along the way where they're expecting a customer to know exactly what they're looking at, or what they're reading. So I think if you genuinely have no idea, and I'm sure there's people out there that don't, find someone who has the knowledge, or let the builder know, or whoever you're dealing with at the builder, just let them know, like, I've got no idea. Can someone really hold my hand through this, and help me understand what I'm looking at? Yeah.
Number 3 of top 3 mistakes. What is it?
The third mistake is, look, I think as a whole, when you think about the building journey, and just the whole idea, and someone committing to spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, whether it be for the first and only time or multiple times, and not have an independent third party just have a look over, even just give it a once over. Not to say that you need someone to hold your hand and have a consultant and spend that extra money if you don't have it through the whole way, but just to have someone give everything a once over, I think is a no-brainer. At a fraction of the cost of what you're building the house, just to make sure that everything's all good, really, or even give you up with a bit of extra information, and to go into that process with, before you embark on that journey, before you sign that dotted line, or whatever stage you're at. I think that's something that almost needs to become necessary in the industry.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's fine. And I guess for those listening, this is not about, we're not really big on plugging businesses and things like that. You'll see there's no ads in front of what we do here. Darren is there, but we're trying to expose you to different people in our industry that can help, and different ways and options that you've got. So if you're one of those people who just don't get it, and you're really uncomfortable, not quite sure, then there are businesses like Fabian's out there that can help you. And if you're a little bit more confident, then go direct to builder, no stress. But make sure you're talking to a consultant that you trust, who's answering these questions, who's providing you with education that you go, oh, I didn't know about that. That's that feeling you want to have from a consultant. That's why we always encourage for you not to go to one builder or one consultant. You should always go to a couple, 2 or 3, get an understanding and get a really good grip on what's happening there. That's all. So you've got options as a client. That's really the point here. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, obviously, I was sort of sitting here thinking a bit about that time frame piece too, about just slowing down. And sometimes I think in that space, it's not, I need a month to make a decision. It's more, you might just need to sleep on it. If that makes sense, and particularly when the market's running hot, and it's certainly in Victoria, the southeast is certainly starting to pick up, but it's not running hot here at all, in reality. But if you're interstate, and obviously we have a lot of interstate listeners, if you're in southeast Queensland or you're in Perth, those markets are running hot. There's a limited supply of land. You've got to make a decision really quickly, right? But you can usually I say, and for the best part, one is get educated before you get to the day of purchase, if it's for land. So find out all the information, get as much information as you can, and then use the tools that are out there, whether, like you say, family and friends, other experts, or if you need, and have the want and need to bring someone into your team to help you out, like Fabian, then do that. But you can do that before the actual day of purchase. If today on a Saturday, the lineup's there and you've got to stand in a line to get your block of land, you can have done all that before you've walked in there and signed a contract and gone, wow, hold on, I'm now committed. What do I do? So they will give you that information, whether it's an engineering plan a subdivision, a copy of what the contract would look like for the land, for example. Likewise with the build, you can do that and not take 6 months to make a decision, because that 6 months can be really costly too. And, having that ability to sleep on it, make sure you feel comfortable, make sure that you've been able to ask a few questions along the way. It does certainly help.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, I love that point that you just made, Daz, because, you know, it'll just make everything more seamless. And I think that little bit more stress-free as you're going through it. If you've geared yourself up as much as you possibly can with all the information, even more information that you probably need, when you're actually going through the process and, it's land first or build contract, most people are working full-time jobs. They're getting sent stuff throughout the day. Then they've got to come home. You might have kids, got to get dinner ready. By the time you sit down and even have a minute to look at what you're being sent, it's, 8 o'clock, 8:30, and that's probably the last thing you want to be doing. And I think just having that knowledge or that support, whether it's research, there's so many resources out there now that people can go to before you go through that process. I reckon it just makes everything that little bit easier. Even if it's at 1%, it goes a long way.
For sure. You mentioned earlier about a HIA contract being 30 plus pages, and obviously for the most part, people are either going to sign a HIA or a master builders contract. What are your thoughts on where the customer really should start in that whole process? And I think, again, something's changed in that space I see, which is a lot of these things are now sent to the customer via DocuSign from a lot of businesses, which actually does buy them a little bit of that time. Whereas previous, you'd often have to come in and sit with a contract signature, or you come and sit with a consultant, and there was some level of pressure to sign that contract in front of them. Whereas now you've bought a little bit of that time. But where do they start? They get this contract. Where would you kick things off from there?
People might not want to hear this, but you have to read it. You have to go through it. Take your time. Again, a lot of what I'm talking about is really just taking your time and pumping the brakes. But you have to read through it, and line by line, and try your best to make sense and understand what you're looking at. Again, there's resources out there that you can reach out to and go to help with that if you don't understand what you're looking at. But yeah, like I said earlier, a build contract is made up of so many different and long-winded sets of documentation that you really have to go through everything. I think that's the only way to go about it. And yeah, again, if it's something you're struggling with navigating that documentation or understanding it, find some resources or some people that can help you with that. Again, whether it's friends or family or a business like ours or something similar, whoever that may be, reach out to them, because it's super important. That's what's going to set up your project or your build for success from the start. It's all in the paperwork. And yeah.
I think that's interesting too, because you get the 30-page part at the front, right, which is all the standard terms and conditions, and 99.9% of homes are built with exactly that same 30 pages. Nothing changes in that, and they get built really successfully. But those last pages being, the part about the actual quotation and what's included, and then their drawings, are probably the pages that sometimes are focused on less. When someone's really going, I'm going to get this contract looked at, they're the pages that aren't looked at, which are the ones that are most important, because if they miss 3 doors in your house, you're going to be really disappointed. But for the most part, the other pages, not much goes wrong in that from, like some people get a bit excited and go, hold on, thought the percentage page, for example, of payment schedule, the builder selected payment schedule number 2, but I really want a payment schedule number 1. They wouldn't even know what the difference is, to be honest. But then they haven't looked at their plans and the house is missing 3 doors,
Yeah,
and they're like halfway through construction, they're pulling their hair out and they've actually focused on the wrong bit in some
yeah,
ways.
yeah, absolutely. And that's you're just emphasizing on the importance of actually going through everything. Because mistakes do happen, right? I don't think anyone's waking up in the morning and going into work, if they're working for a builder and saying, I want to do a shit job today. It's, things happen. There's slip ups that happen, and you got to do your best as a customer. You have to do your part as well to try and keep things on track and make sure that things are as they should be. It's a two-way dance, really. Like, we can't just expect the builder to get everything perfect and the people that work for the builders to get everything perfect. I also think that a client has a due diligence there on their own project to make sure that what they're being presented with is what they're expecting, and the changes that they've requested are in there, and all that sort of stuff.
I guess maybe a step aside from our questions. We don't normally do this to ambush you, but um, with respect to the process you go through with a customer, how early in that process do you get? Are you happy and keen to get involved? Is it at the quoting process, and then sort of where do you step away as well through that process? Generally, would you would you get involved? As early as to say like a initial quotation, and then when do
Yeah,
you say, hey, you guys are on your own again now?
yeah. There's no limitation as to where we can get involved or a client can engage us. I mean, we're gonna help out regardless. You know, our we found a really narrow swim lane in supporting through that pre-construction journey. Um, and that's where we specialize, and that's the swim lane that we'll stay in. So um, typically it's pre-contract signing. The client would come to us, and if anyone from the first home buyer that has no idea that we were talking about, that needs their hand held, to that time poor, you know I guess working family that doesn't have the time to look through their stuff and they just want someone to sort of give them the yes or a no. And yeah, so sorry, to answer your question, really, it's at any point through their pre-construction process. That's not to say that we walk away once the slab's in the ground, but I've got a couple of clients now that jobs are in construction that sort of touch base and have some questions about the construction journey too. So yeah, we definitely don't walk away, but we specialise in that pre-construction journey.
Makes sense. So I guess in the same sort of light, what have you got some examples of clients in terms of paperwork errors and assumptions they've made, and sort of what happened there? So let's dive down to a few examples.
Yeah, a couple of examples. I mean, the biggest one that always comes up for me was a client that was spending about $950,000 with a volume builder, pretty reputable builder in Melbourne. But he had made a lot of changes, and I think as we know, working in that game for so long, that's where most of the trip ups happen, and when clients start to make some really significant, especially structural changes, and just a lot of his many things that we looked at that were in his either contract or variations just weren't shown on the plans, and he didn't understand at all how to like he couldn't even tell if how a door was shown on his plans, for example, right? Something that we probably take for granted, something so simple to us. Um, and yeah, I guess we just worked with him, and there was a few things that just weren't on his drawings that he had paid for. A couple of like window changes as some examples, window changes, doors on rooms that didn't have doors. He wanted doors on there, cladding changes, things like that. So yeah, I think, you know, not so much that the client got caught out. He would have been caught out if he didn't have someone supporting him. But yeah, we worked through that and got his plans fixed and coached him on how to deal with the builder and what that process looks like, and eventually got everything sorted. So I think a bit of risk mitigation there too for the builder and cost reduction. For you know rectification works that now don't need to happen because everything's there.
It's interesting you say that too. I think, like thinking about exactly that example, that just because the door or whatever's not on the drawings doesn't mean that the builder's not obliged to put that in. There may be some negotiation around. Hold on, is it now physically possible? What do we do? How are we going to do it? But there is obligation based on the hierarchy within the contract, and that's why reading those early parts of the contract and understanding it, helps out. But you're now in a bit of a loggerhead though when you get to that position too. That great, you've got it in writing as part of the tender. That overrules the standard inclusions or the inclusions list that the builder provides, which those two then overrule the drawings. So, if you follow that hierarchy back, then they should be entitled to get that door installed. However, now you've just got this messy situation. So much better it's picked up earlier and addressed, because the journey on site's just so much smoother. They're not having a fight about it later, and having that advice, because like I said, in that case the customer couldn't understand the drawings. There's no hope of trying to pick that stuff up, and that's where obviously your expertise comes in, and from a third party point of view, I think it really helps out too. There's no bias in that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, a lot of these businesses are just like mine. We just want to be objective too. We're not, telling clients not to build with that one and go to that one. There's no affiliations there with any builders, but I think that's thinking about if clients who are looking to build or are building, that's an important piece. Finding someone, if you are going to engage with someone as a third party, to help you through all that, find someone who's going to give you just objective advice, similarly to what you guys are doing here. It's just stating facts and providing education. There's no ads like you mentioned before, Colin. It's just completely, it's education, really.
Yep. And I think on the one thing, advice that we've covered lots of times on this topic around plans and tender or contract or quote is making sure that they reference each other and that they're all included. And like you said, making changes does trigger more errors because you've made changes, and I think there are things that most people, I would say, do not know how to look at plans properly. But like I said before with the question, if you don't know what question to ask, you don't know to ask it. And if you don't know what's missing in a plan, you don't know it's missing, right? So things like making sure your electrical is one big one we've talked about a lot. Go through your electrical plan in detail. Make sure you check the heights. Make sure the PowerPoint location is logical. Is it on the right side of the wall, left side of the wall? And things like even the sliding door, make sure it's sliding the right way. The windows, make sure they're sliding the right way. Like, you've got to go through, and we call this, and don't comment or bloody have a go at me, but in our business, we call this a girl check. And we actually have a couple of our admin people who just happen to be female, who call it a girl check. They created the name, and they just look at it from a practical sense, and they go to the client, hey, have you thought about putting this PowerPoint in your broom cupboard? Because then you can hang your vacuum there. These are the things with a whirlwind of everything else going on, getting your land contract and your build and your promo and all this stuff put in place. You just forget some of these things. And by the time you've had 3 or 4 months go by, and then you've just got time to look at it, and you're like, oh, I didn't even think of that. These are the things you should be asking and going through. So there's a range there. We've got episodes you can track back on here that will help. Actually, there's lists of them basically that we've highlighted for you. So yeah, it's a really good point. Any other simple or paperwork errors that you've seen across that people are making there, Fabian?
Yeah, I think aside from, obviously what I said earlier, and just things not being correct on drawings, or, we see a bit of, things that shouldn't be in a contract or a tender that are in there. So working with clients to take those out. One example of that would be, bushfire requirements. I know a lot of builders now just put bushfire requirements in as a sort of standard item, and then take it out once they receive the relevant information, further in the journey after contract signing, and you'll get a credit back for that. But sometimes those things get forgotten about. Simple mistakes. So there's a couple of those where we've seen, they just haven't been taken out. The client hasn't been credited. And also, I think if we talk about paperwork errors or assumptions, and I've said this a couple of times during this podcast, but so signing things that you have no idea what it's for, or understanding what it is, we see that time and time again. Ask the questions, make sure you've got, your questions are answered. You've got to ask that question 3 or 4 times, like Darren said earlier. Whether that person you're dealing with directly can't help you, they're going to find someone who can help you and get that information and get your question answered. But I think that is key for me. Before you sign anything, make sure you understand what you're signing. What is it for? Get the knowledge and the explanation around exactly what's happening, and then feel confident in signing it too, right? If you're going to have to sign it anyway, at least go, you know what? I know exactly what that's for. They've done a really good job at coaching me and explaining to me exactly why this is happening. I understand it. Maybe I might not be happy that they're charging me an extra few grand or whatever it is, but that's just how it goes, and you can play on. Not sign it and then you're not able to sleep for 3 weeks because you're thinking about what it was and, oh my God, what's this, and when's the next one going to come up, and why is this happening? I think you're adding stress, unnecessary stress and pressure on yourself by not asking the questions and making those assumptions.
For sure. Love it, love it. Tell me, one that we see a lot is variations and changes to the contract after it's been signed. What sort of advice do you give to clients around that and how best to handle that?
One piece of advice that I give, or that I will give to all customers that are building, is once you've signed a contract and things start to happen from the builder's part, right? Permits start to get ordered, or the plans start to get prepped for developer approval if it's got to go down that path, or council application, things like that. If you change your mind after you've signed a contract while all that stuff's taking place, more often than not, you're going to be charged just to process that variation. And I bring that up because, I've had a couple of people say, why are they charging me $500 as a variation fee? And then they're going to charge me for the door itself that I want to put on that ensuite or whatever it is. It costs money and time and resource for these changes to be made from the builder's end. So, they're not going to work for nothing. I don't think anyone wants to work for nothing. So I think that's one bit of advice is, it does clog up the system a little bit and clog up the flow of a job if you're making these changes along the journey while they're preparing your plans and doing all the things that I said earlier. So try and be as considered and as thoughtful as you can before you sign the contract, or as early in the piece as you can, as you said earlier, Darren, because you'll be able to prevent a lot of that, and your job will just move through the process a lot quicker, and less back and forth, no additional variation fees. Hopefully save a bit of money in that space as well, and and then you get what you want from the start as opposed to making changes along the way.
Excellent. Preparation definitely prevents a lot of those variations from coming, but inevitably you're due to sign a couple of variations, pretty much all clients, just for different reasons and different things. It can happen, even sometimes just a variation for clarification, So that's a good point. And I think we do face that a little bit. Builder has the right to charge administration fees because you've got person 1 who's got to prepare it, person 2 who's then got to go make the change, person 3 who has to hold up what they're doing in order to wait for that to happen, and then the supplier or the trade, and that's got to, depending on where you're in the process. So it can have a knock-on effect that is a little bit deeper than what most people give understanding or thought to, and that's why you get those. And they're also there to stop you from making unnecessary changes too. It's like, well, I want to flip the door. And so, well, you've had 3 months at the start of the process to work out what side you want that door on, and now we're already on site and you want to change it. Well, here's a bit of pain money too. It's going to cost you $2,000. Well, actually, I'll leave the door as it is. Great. Thought so. Thanks. Let's move on. Like that can happen too. So, but really they have the right to do that. You've had the opportunity. So like you said at the top, Fabian, with the first sort of 3 or 4 questions, Make sure you get the advice if you need it. And if you don't need it, go through all the things of reading the contract, make sure you know what's included, all those things, so you don't have to ask these questions of stuff that you missed later on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you raise a good point there, Colin, too, about, it's almost inevitable that you're going to get a variation of some form at some point along the way.
Yep.
And I'd probably advise people to expect that. If you don't, great, it's a win. I don't think there's many instances where a client won't. There's so much that happens at the front end, and there's so much that can't be determined at the time of a contract signing, say, for example, where, a builder won't apply for certain information or request certain information from other, whatever it might be, SOR reports or council information, things like that. And they actually can't fix a price upfront at the contract signing, or provide you with the accurate information because they don't have it at that stage. So, I think that's a good point you raised, Colin. Expect some variations to come your way, and just understand that as best you can that's how the process goes, and understand the builder's process too. They're not out to get you. It's just how things have to work.
Yep. Excellent.
It needs to be the variation to the contract still forms part of the contract, and it needs to be in place. Then that's protection for the customer as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Nice. Well, there you go, Fabian. Tell us, how do we reach you at Phase Consulting? Website and email?
Yeah, so website www.phaseconsulting.com.au. You can email us at info@phaseconsulting.com.au. I've been pretty heavy on the social media lately, so check us out on Instagram, Facebook. Instagram's phase.consulting and Facebook is just Phase Consulting. So you can reach us on any of those. And yeah, for any pre-construction support, I guess, the bigger and broader mission for what we're doing at Phase is really just to provide access to the customer who is building a home with the support resources that they need, and that I believe that everyone should have access to. Specializing in that pre-construction journey, and really just want to be everyone's mate that works in the building industry that you can turn to, ask questions, get your stuff looked at, and help you along the way.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us, Fabian. And for those people who just don't have the time, for those people who don't quite understand it or everything in between that, also for those people who, when you hear this technical stuff, you have the monkey just crashing the cymbals in your head because you just don't want to listen to it. Those people, those ones listening, you should consult with a business like Fabian. They can come in, do all that sort of stuff for a fee. It'll save you a lot of time, energy, effort, and eliminate a lot of those mistakes that you inevitably might make because you don't have the time to put in up front. So thanks for joining again. And anyone who has any questions about, our podcast, any topic ideas, jump on. There's hello@homebuildinghub.com.au is the email you can send it to. Really helpful. Of course, 5-star review. Thank you very much. If you like what you're listening to, we'd love that on the platform you're on. And other than that, you guys have a good day, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the podcast, guys. And just our disclaimer, whilst we're all about providing value to you, this podcast should not be considered as legal or financial advice. It contains general information only, and you should seek out independent professional advice on your personal situation before making any legal or financial decisions.
1, 2,